I was thinking about suggesting Groundhog Day for next time we meet.
For actual Groundhog Day.
Yeah.
Dude, I can't talk about that movie for an hour.
Really?
Yeah.
I think it's a pretty interesting movie.
I can't talk an hour about that movie.
All right, well, back to the drawing board.
Mm-hmm. Draw that board. Hey, what day is this going to actually release on Groundhog Day?
This?
Yeah,
Maybe.
this episode. Because Last Jedi, Video Game. Oh, okay.
Basically.
So we have a bumper now.
Yeah, we do. Kind of.
Kind of. Yeah, maybe not. I don't know. I figured.
Whatever.
Alrighty, welcome back to the Why Do I Talk to You podcast. I'm Saul Starsheep 4.
I'm Dave Gamer Dave Naple.
Okay, so when coming up with topics for what we were going to do for this particular recording session, came to our attention that as much as we've talked about Disney movies and Pixar movies and whatnot, we have actually yet to dedicate a whole episode on a Pixar movie.
Yeah.
So, rather arbitrarily, I think. Well, you know, we were kind of we're in a bit of a state currently, just in our lives, and so Dave just wanted to chill out for a bit, talk about nice things and watch a chill out movie, like similar to when we watched My Neighbor Totoro.
Although we didn't necessarily know that's what we were getting into. That
True.
Time. Yeah.
We got out of watching Totoro just like feeling so relaxed and just chill, just like we feel good,
Yeah.
And I was like, when I just want to like relax and like feel good, like I usually just put on Ratatouille. I like the easygoing vibe of that movie and whatnot. He was like, all right, we can do an episode on that. So here we are. This episode, I guess, is more centered towards me, I guess, because I've stated before, I'm pretty sure that Ratatouille is my absolute favorite Pixar movie. I don't know if I can say it's my like absolute favorite Disney movie, but for sure, Pixar movie. It is definitely a number one, like without a doubt.
El numero uno, or you say that in French.
It's not that.
It's not that. Nope.
So
I don't know French.
Yeah. So
Great.
So Ratatouille, released in the year 2007. Directed by Brad Bird, who before directing Ratatouille did The Incredibles.
Yeah. Didn't he do The Iron Giant before that?
He did.
I don't like that movie.
And he was also... You don't like that movie?
No.
Really? Why not?
Probably because I just have bad memories of days when I would just be at my grandparents and want to watch Cartoon Network, and they were doing another all-day Iron Giant marathon.
Oh.
I swear they did it all the time. And it wasn't. No thanks.
Maybe we should probably watch that again then. I mean, we're separate from that. Iron Giant is like...
I know. Everybody,
one of like the unsung heroes.
Every time you talk about people, like, oh, what an underrated piece of animated art. I'm just like, tries to be edgy sometimes, I guess. But
we should
have to see it again.
We should give that a shot. Yeah.
Okay. It's interesting because you can definitely see some of like the parallels in how he likes his animated character design. Like my vague recollection of the villain in that movie is very similar to Anton Ego. Obviously not old, but he's just very long and spindly. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's kind of tropey too. Also,
yeah,
like,
I guess
animated villains are normally like creepily lanky, or they're also like beefy.
Yeah.
Anyways,
I mean that's not what they did with Syndrome, but. Kind of more reminds me more of Frozone, and it's very spindly. Like the fingers look like little sticks, and they like get together. And
well,
stuff,
the animation design in Incredibles is also weird. Also, like how like Violet is like literally pencil thin. Like
it's all over the top. I mean, we can get to it in this movie, but the chef just kind of looks like a monkey whenever he doesn't have his hat on.
Yeah,
he kind of moves like a monkey too. He like puts his arms out under him. He's like, "Who is responsible for this?" And dancing around like Diddy Kong or something like that. Get a little ahead of ourselves.
Well, to your point, yeah, Brad Bird is really good at and Pixar in general. They're good at being like, animating humans while still being cartoony with them. For the longest time, the thing that bothered me with DreamWorks I guess specifically in Shrek, was how they really tried to make their humans look realistic, and it was just sort of
And they
like,
were just like next to Shrek, and you're like,
yeah, you're just like, this isn't right. Like,
Yeah.
not Uncanny Valley, just this
no.
isn't right.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, Brad Bird made his name through that way, and also through The Simpsons too.
Oh.
Yeah, he's a Simpsons alum, like in like the Simpsons heyday.
Okay.
So yeah. If you've watched Nostalgia Critics Disney-cember, when he talks about some of these movies like Incredibles and Ratatouille, you hear how excited he is that Brad Bird got on to do Incredibles, and also how excited he was that he came back for Ratatouille. And for good reason. You know, Nostalgia Critics obviously a bigger movie animation nerd buff than I am.
Well, yeah.
You know, I didn't when the time these movies came out, I didn't know who directors were.
No, I
just-
didn't either.
I
But I
just-
still don't. So, you know.
I mean, I don't like care necessarily, but it does, you know, you do see the director's like style in each of these movies, like when you know who it is behind it, you know, like a Wes Anderson movie, like, you know, it's a Wes Anderson movie. Anyways, so yeah, Ratatouille came out in the year 2007. I mean, like,
It didn't get a lot of hype.
I guess not. It got about as much hype as any Disney movie, any Pixar movie did in the day.
What came before it?
Cars.
Okay. Well, Cars wasn't very popular. So, and that was kind of the first Pixar movie that wasn't that popular, right? So,
Well, you got to think about what it means to be popular, because Cars sold a lot of merchandise and
a
still
lot
does.
of, well, like critically acclaimed, and it didn't feel like an event. Like, I've used that term before, right? Felt like all the Pixar movies were like an event. And Cars kind of didn't feel like an event that you had to go be a part of, because people were kind of like, it's all right.
I mean, I guess, but at the same time, we didn't know it was going to be, it's all right, you know?
Yeah, but it was following that. So you're kind of like, okay. I mean, I think this was still in Pixar's heyday, right?
Yeah,
I think
it
I would
is.
still call it.
So I don't-
But when, like, just talking about just the people I was surrounded with in that age was like all the Pixar movies before it was like, oh, we gotta go see this one. And the Ratatouille, they're like, it's kind of ironic given the theme of the movie. They're like, I don't know if I want to go see a movie about a bunch of rats. Like, that just kind of weirds me out, man.
That's interesting. For me, in my circles, it was just like, yeah, another Pixar movie. We got to see it.
No, yeah, for me it was very much like, oh, rats. I pass on this one.
Oh, rats.
Yeah.
Oh, rats.
Thank you.
So, anyways, yeah, this movie I have seen tons of
Probably
times.
a lot.
I have seen it tons of times. I was being that guy when we were just watching it a couple of minutes ago and like quoting everything.
Yeah.
Because I remember like every single quote from that whole movie. I mean, just on the surface, I love virtually everything about this movie. I love the primary color palettes. It's really like sort of sepia, because there's a lot of like these nice tans everywhere, you know, in the copper cookware in the kitchens. There's a lot of nice blue, sort of like grayish blue,
like the evening sky and a lot of like the
Yeah.
evening lanterns, even though we're apparently in modern times, but we'll get to that.
I love that atmosphere. I just love it. I loved it then. It just makes me feel warm, you know?
It
like
is
I just,
very warm.
Yeah. That's
Like they
that's what I
set a
love.
lot of those lights in like colder, in the midst of colder colors, and so it gives you that feeling of like a fire in the cold, like when you really
Yeah.
appreciate the warmth.
It's beautiful. I liked the voice acting.
Bunch of people I don't know.
Well, that's okay. I mean, because never mind.
No, Saul, please tell me.
You don't
No,
know
don't.
anybody, Dave.
Yeah, it's true. It's pretty true.
The music, super, super awesome, especially the song written for it, Le Feston, written by composed, written by
Giacchino.
Michael Giacchino.
Of Muppet Monsters fame.
Great. Now we have to. You know what? I'm not ashamed. Yuck it up. Yuck it
will.
up. I love that song.
Yeah. Now we do have to release them in order. We finally did it.
Yeah.
I finally made the reference.
No, not we. That was all you, buddy boy.
Thank you. I'll be here all night.
This was also your rule too.
Yeah, it was. That's right.
Can I move on?
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Uh-huh.
All right. He's such a jerk. Oh man. So let's go through the movie. Let's start from the tap, okay?
Okay.
So previews for this movie, much like in Pixar fashion, the previews involved scenes that do not show themselves in
Kind
the
of
movie.
sad they stopped doing that.
Me too.
I wonder if they're doing it again for The Incredibles. I wonder if that scene with like the baby frying off his hair is actually going to be in the movie. I really hope not.
Oh
I
yeah,
hope it's not in the movie. So maybe they're going back to that. Anyway,
yeah. So they were doing that here. I remember like promos used to have to put the pronunciation of Ratatouille.
Oh, yeah, that was
in the
funny.
titles. Because at first, I mean, I didn't know what it was, so I was like Ratatouille.
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 The sequel to
Wild.
Ratatouille.
So yeah, I don't remember exactly like the month in which it came out, but I do remember that it came out around the time that I started dating my soon-to-be wife again.
Again.
If we're gonna stick with
After the
linking these
first
two
time.
episodes together, this is part 2.
Next episode, we're going to do it on the second time they broke up and got back together.
Hey,
the movie was watching then.
there wasn't a second time.
And then the time they got engaged, we'll do the movie then. We'll just go through the full timeline. It'll be great.
There actually was a.
Oh, God.
Okay, never mind. So, anyways, the movie came out around that time. It was like one of our first dates together, and then it came out on iTunes a couple of months later, and I just kept watching it over and over and over again. Oh wait, we're supposed to start talking about the movie now. I'm sorry.
No, you finish. You better finish that thought.
Okay. Well, I mean, there's no other thoughts. I just remember that I bought it when I was my first year in college when I was dorming, and it was like one of the like many sources of comfort that I had like that year and that whole semester was just watching that over and over and over again. And like, luckily I'd always turn it on when my roommate wasn't there. Or like I'd like be doing homework to it, with my headphones on or whatever. Like I just couldn't, I was just so obsessed with the movie. Still am, although I don't watch it nearly as often as I used to. But like anytime I watch it now, it's like, it's a treat,
Yeah. So the movie.
All right, we'll finally start. So the main character, his name is not Ratatouille.
No, it's not. That's kind of a surprise.
His name is Remy, voiced by Patton Oswalt. He's a comedian, and one thing that I'm not always a fan of in movies, and I will say that this movie commits, is like when it starts out like a first person narrative, and then it just like sort of stops. And either they just like forget about it or they pick it up again in the middle of the movie. You know
Or
what I
at
mean?
the end or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this movie starts with that. It's like Remy sort of like literally it does a freeze frame and it's like you might be wondering how I ended up in this situation. Well,
Canned
a long
laughter.
time ago. Yeah.
Sitcom laughs. Yeah.
So Remy's a rat living with a colony that's infested this old woman's house. But Remy also has like a crazy sense of smell. And he uses that to like learn about human food. And like the old woman also likes to watch like a cooking channel that has this famous chef named Auguste Cousteau in it. Cousteau is
Fat.
he has a gosh.
Yeah, he is.
He has a philosophy that like anyone can cook. Like that's his whole thing is like accessibility for anybody to be able to cook. And so that's where like Remy starts to get like his inspiration and just sort of like, yeah, maybe I can try. But then eventually they're caught. Or rather, he is caught by the old woman because he's spending too much time inside the human kitchen. To the point where the woman is like trying to get him and his brother
With a shotgun.
with a, like you do.
As you do.
Ends up shooting up the entire ceiling off.
Yeah.
Literally, her entire ceiling off to uncover the whole colony, which is like billions and billions of
of rats. Infesting this one woman's home.
So that's a pretty good impression.
Thank you.
So they all skedaddle. Meanwhile, she's like literally employing every method. Like
She gets her World War I gas mask on with the freaking gas spewers she's going to fill her house with, I guess. It's like that freaking story that just came out recently. I don't think Saul saw this. I think it was in South Carolina or something.
Oh, of
where
course.
someone like grabs some like freaking the torch they had around the house or something instead of spraying it at the spider and caused like $12,000 worth of damage.
That sounds like somebody trying to make a meme, right?
Maybe they just had $12,000 lying around. They're like, this will be my 15. It's worth it. It's worth it. I didn't actually read the story. I just saw the headline. I didn't take the clickbait.
Well, it probably wasn't worth your time anyways.
Probably not.
Headline gave you all you needed.
Yeah, really it did.
So
anyway.
So the colony's running away, and Remy gets separated from them.
Because he goes back to get Gusteau's cookbook.
Foolishly. He gets separated from the rest of the colony, and he gets washed down a storm drain. He then is visited by a hallucination of Gusteau, who just tells him to explore along. And through that, he eventually actually finds that he got washed down into downtown Paris in front of Gusteau's restaurant.
Wow.
What are the odds?
How convenient. I totally meant to lead you here, Gusteau says.
So then he's able to watch the kitchen, and he's completely enthralled by, the energy and the food and everything. Meanwhile, a lowly, awkward boy named Linguini, Alfredo Linguini.
What a terrible name.
Yeah, I thought it was a bad joke then, too, I'll be honest.
Although he kind of moves like a pasta noodle. Like a wet pasta noodle. He does.
Can you...
Exactly.
Can you be like a dance teacher, please, and just be like, "Oh, you move like a dry pasta noodle."
I need to do like a wet pasta noodle. Gosh.
So he's able to get a job as like a garbage boy in Gusteau's kitchen, who's now being led by his former sous chef Skinner, because he has his mom used to be an old flame of Gusteau's.
And apparently they were all friends with her or something.
Or something, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know.
Oh,
She's
boy.
dead.
So Linguini gets a job because he's apparently a deadbeat,
Yeah.
which you can believe. He's just mopping the floors, and then he knocks over this big stock pot
Soup.
of soup and like tries to repair it by just sort of like throwing in like everything but the kitchen sink
Like
inside of
water, green onions, whatever
it.
this
Some powdery
is.
stuff. It might be Ajax. I don't know. And so then Remy's freaking out because he's watching the whole thing, and then he actually accidentally falls through like the window that he was observing them through, and is like running through the kitchen, yada yada, until he happens to run by the soup, and like he smells it, and he's all like, "Oh gosh, I gotta do something." And so he eventually just creates an entirely new soup out of like what it is that he made, and of course he's caught. So
By Linguini. Not by anybody important.
He's caught, but it turns out that the soup is served anyways, and it turned out to be really, really good. So everybody, of course, thinks that Linguini made it, and like another chef sort of stands up for him because he's following Gusteau's principle of like anyone can cook, and so even
Yes, it's the female chef specifically.
yes, her name
It's
is
important.
Colette Tattoo.
I didn't know her last name.
Oh yeah, I know everyone.
Oh my god.
And so,
Do you know all the other chefs' names?
not their last names,
Oh, okay.
but yes.
Great. I want you to identify each one of them by name at least once in this episode.
I'll do my best.
Okay.
Oh, wait a minute though. I'm having issue with. Oh no, I got it. All right, so never
Gotcha.
mind. So anyway, all right. So they all think that it's Linguini, and so they decide to give him a shot, even though Chef Skinner is like really like sort of unwilling to do so.
Doesn't buy it.
No, and so but Remy is spotted again, and he is told Linguini is told to get
Linguini
rid
catches
of him.
him, yeah.
He's told to get rid of him, but in the end, you kind of he finds out that Remy can understand humans and understand English too.
And he saw
so,
him make the soup, so he realizes he's in hot water, that he can't make the soup, that he's not a chef, and he's like, "Can you make the soup?"
right?
Yeah,
No,
maybe. Yeah.
So basically, Remy agrees because he wants to be in a kitchen. They find out that Remy can control his actions by pulling on his hair and hiding inside his chef's hat.
Sure.
It's cute. You
Yeah,
know?
that's clever.
So yeah, everything's okay. He has to personally work with Colette under Chef Skinner's rules. And
Since
Colette,
Colette stood up for him,
Yeah.
Skinner's like, "Well, you teach him how to cook," and she's like, "Yeah."
and so Colette eventually warms up to him, although
For some reason.
For some reason, although in the beginning she is about ready to stab him in the face. So he learns the way of the kitchen and whatnot. Then some needy patrons go into the restaurant and ask for something new off menu. So Skinner decides to use this as a trap for Linguini and gives him a purposely really, really awful recipe, an old recipe from Gusteau.
Yeah. This is after a scene where like part of the teaching Colette was telling him like, Gusteau says you got to experiment, and he's like, oh, okay, so do new things. He's like, no, never do new things. You follow he does new things. You follow the recipe. So it's like, okay, we follow the recipe.
Okay. And so they're doing that. Even Colette's all like, I don't even know this one, but it's Gusteau, so let's do it. But Remy is making it and he just can't stand it. So he has to like create like a new sauce to go over it instead of the anchovy licorice sauce.
Cuttlefish, something like that.
It's everything.
Yeah.
It's a sweetbread dish. So anyways, Remy like does it even though Colette is protesting the whole time and is even angry at Linguini. However, of course, the sauce and the whole dish as a whole is a complete success. At this point now,
they kind of just set up this sort of conflict where Linguini's fallen for Colette and like wants to do what she says, but Remy's just a better chef than her, so he just kind of wants to make stuff that's good. And so Linguini's kind of caught between wanting to make out with this hot French lady and wanting to keep his job because, let's be real, this rat is his meal ticket.
Hey. But not only that, because after or in the midst of the sequence, then he's giving Remy a break outside and he gives him a little cheese plate or whatever. And then he runs into his brother, like when they were since they were separated from the beginning of the movie. And the brother takes him back to the colony where his dad is, who's like the leader of the colony. Remy is telling him that like, yeah, I have this human now. We're cool. And, I have a job and I have this place downtown. So, yeah, I'll be over to visit. But like, the dad is
not cool.
No, because the dad's all like, we're rats. Like, you're talking like humans. Like, rats always stay together.
They set up this sort of conflict between him and his dad earlier in the movie.
Yeah.
But anyway.
His dad even shows him like an exterminator's place, like, because he's like, this is what people do to rats in this area.
With all these dead rats in the window, that can't be sanitary.
Yeah, right.
You can't just leave those hanging there.
What is this, a butcher shop?
Gross. Anyway.
What happens after this?
He gives his little speech.
Oh, yeah.
He's like, change happens when we want it to, or something. I don't know.
That's exactly it. How did you know? Change happens when something or other.
Something.
Gotta go.
I got work in the morning.
Okay, then another plot point happens where a really harsh critic.
Wait, we missed the plot point.
Did we?
When's the part where he realizes that Linguini is Gusteau's son?
That's actually after this.
Is it actually after this? Yeah. Holy cow, okay.
So
there's a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah, there is. So there's a plot point of a really harsh food critic introduced very early in the movie. His name is Anton Ego, also known as the Grim Eater, who is just like really snobby. And the one time he went to eat at Gusteau's restaurant when Gusteau was alive, he gave him a really scathing review, to the point where they had to lose one of their 5 stars. And apparently it stressed out Gusteau so much that he died and they lost even another star. So they went from a 5-star restaurant to a 3-star restaurant.
No wonder his office is shaped like a coffin. He literally kills people with his reviews. Brutal.
So he's finding that Gusteau's is getting popular again because of Linguini. So he's popular. Voiced by the wonderful Peter O'Toole. What a voice.
What a voice.
What a voice.
Indeed.
Now this is when we discover through Chef Skinner's lawyer and through a DNA test. So side note, this movie is very much like rooted in like the 1950s
it feels
or like the 60s or whatever.
Piece.
Yeah. Like, there's like those old projection TVs and cars are looking like really old and whatnot. All the cookware in the kitchen is all rustic and copper. Excuse me. And it's all really old, except for a couple of things that like seem to make this like make you think that it's supposed to be timeless. One of them being that they can do DNA testing. Like, I don't think that was around in the 50s or the 60s.
I don't
was
feel
it?
like it would be, just available to some lawyer to
Prob-
be like, let me just take his into the local DNA tester.
DNA RS.
I feel like, yeah, at best, I feel like DNA testing has actually been around for longer than we give it credit for, but I feel like you would have to like go to the courts. It'd be
Yeah.
wouldn't be just the simple thing like, let me get a couple hair follicles and, go to DNA RS or whatever. Take this down to Maurice on the TV or whatever and figure out who the father is.
It's nice.
Thanks.
Nice one.
I made a reference.
Watched Maurice. You are not the father. Oh gosh.
Oops, sorry. Sorry, I'll have to hear that.
All right, moving on. So basically, through that, they discover that Linguini is indeed Gusto's son, and that would make him the rightful heir because the period of him to be able to claim that is like still in effect.
Yeah, it's like ending at the end of the month, and Skinner's freaking out because if a live heir doesn't show up by the end of the month, then it's all his, and he's built Gusto into like a frozen food empire, like Chef Boyardee or what have you.
It's actually pretty funny that part.
They make reference to that at one point, but
They do, yeah. So basically, Remy goes in because now his family is sort of bothering him to like give them food, like give them actual good food, because he wanted to teach his brother about what good food actually is, but now his brother's sort of like
squealed.
he let the cat out of the bag.
Get it?
and
Squealed.
They don't.
He's a rat.
They don't squeal.
He's a rat, so
They don't
squealed.
So, I get it.
You just not whatever.
I'm not laughing at your joke.
I'm laughing.
Good.
Continue.
For you. You always laugh at the both of us for your stupid jokes.
Well, thank you.
So Remy has to go inside the office in order to open the walk-in.
Because they locked it for some reason. I forget why.
Case.
I think there's another subplot where Skinner has seen Remy around and is really suspicious of what he's doing with Linguini. And maybe that's supposed to be implied why they locked the room. I don't know. Yeah.
But anyways, Remy has to infiltrate the office, and during that he comes across the papers of Linguini's initial letter that says that Linguini is Gusto's son.
Not Linguini, it's the Old Flames letter.
That's what I said.
Well,
Linguini's mom.
Oh, Linguini. Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Anyway, so he makes the connection, but then Skinner happens to walk right in. But then Remy takes all the necessary papers and runs away with it. Chasing in shoes, good old Brad Bird.
It's fun.
And then Skinner's fired.
Because Remy gets away. Apparently, by the time Skinner manages to get back, then somehow Remy got the paperwork to them, and they, I don't know, talk to a lawyer or something. They're in charge now.
So they tear down the frozen food fortune, and Linguini is like super famous now. He can afford a really nice apartment, still overlooking the Eiffel Tower, and he's doing a big like press junket. And at this point, also Remy is getting tired of not getting any credit.
Yeah.
But it's also like, come on, dude, like, what do you?
You're a rat.
You're a rat. That's what this movie's about, right? Rats are still.
You're a rat. They're still second-rate people.
So during the press junket, Ego comes up unannounced and basically challenges him. He says that he's going to come for dinner that weekend,
Like the next day or
the
something.
next day or whatever. And so, but after this, Remy is still really sore at Linguini, and Linguini even like straight up just like, needs to separate from him for a little bit. So in his anger, Remy calls his whole family to the kitchen like after hours and just like invades the walk-in. But during this, Linguini knew that he was gonna like still be there, so he came and like apologized to him and like laid it all on the line. But he discovers the whole family, and then that's
He's not super happy about it. Yeah. And there'd been kind of tension building up between Linguini and Remy already due to the whole romance thing between him and Colette, and they like kiss at one point when he's about to tell her about Remy, and Remy's like, "Nope, you're just gonna kiss her instead." And instead of getting pepper sprayed, which is kind of funny, she's just like, "It's France, whatever, let's go with it."
Yeah, Pepe Le Pew kissed me not too long ago.
Yeah, whatever. This is a normal day.
Seems very offensive, Dave.
What?
I don't know, stereotypes.
Sorry to all our French listeners.
Oh man. So, anyways,
Our old timey 1950s French listeners. If you're listening in the past,
in case.
Yeah.
Just
Anyway.
in case. So Remy then is accidentally captured by one of Skinner's rat traps. Because Skinner definitely now knows who it is.
Yeah.
And so he tells him that he's going to make him his frozen foods for him and yada yada. So he's trapped. But his family is able to rescue him out of the trap. And so he runs straight back for the restaurant because the dinner service is beginning where Ego is already there. And in the kitchen, Linguini is freaking out because they're asking him about like how he made the soup, how he made everything else like that. And he's just sort of like, I don't know. Like, why are you asking me? And they're like, 'cause you made it. And it's like, well, no, you do it. And I'm like, I can't do it. You made it. Just tell us how. And then, So, Remy finally comes back. And like everybody's about to kill him because he's a rat, but then Linguini stands up for him in front of everybody, and like reveals the whole truth to everybody at that moment, which causes everybody to like lose entire faith in their life.
Yeah, apparently they're just like, well, my life is meaningless. I'm just gonna quit my job and go home.
So that's what they do. Every single one of them leaves. And so Linguini basically gives up. But Remy's dad was around and saw that Linguini actually stood up for a small little rat. So he calls the entire colony to come and like make the food. Like he washes them in like a dishwasher, like those industrial dishwashers, and then they are making the whole entire meal.
Yeah.
But not
kind of a neat scene.
But not before a health inspector comes. It just completely randomly.
Well, Skinner had called him
yeah.
earlier in the movie, and he was like, "I will look you in 3 months, and maybe I do walk in if someone cancels, whatever." And turns out this is when he shows up, because of course he does.
On like during the busy hour during a dinner service.
Yeah.
Like, this is the best time for a surprise inspection.
Until he, the rats swarm him, and he's like, "Not like this." And they tie him up and throw him in the, what is it? The food?
Walk-in.
Yeah, the walk-in. Yeah.
So Colette is driving away again, just like disillusioned with life, and she's at an intersection and she sees Gusteau's "Anyone Can Cook" book inside of a bookstore, and then she sort of realizes like,
because through the whole movie she's sort of been like constantly sticking up for Gusteau's ideals for some reason, and it's fine, whatever. And so when she sees that, she's like, oh.
So she comes back. She sees all these rats cooking, and meanwhile, Linguini is now the waiter on roller skates, like a drive-in, and taking orders and everything else like that. So Remy decides that he wants to cook ratatouille for him for Ego,
because Ego. It's this really funny scene with the maitre d', actually.
Yeah, where he's just trolling the maitre d'.
The maitre is like, I want to get your food, but you're not ordering a food. You're just saying.
I want some perspective. Wine with the perspective.
I mean, I can get you some wine. It seems like you pre-gamed quite a bit if you're asking for
then I'll give the perspective.
Oh, okay,
you
sir.
give the wine.
Okay. What wine?
Give me the food! We should go on Broadway.
No. No.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so Remy wants to cook ratatouille, but it does it in a different way, and I'll explain about that later too.
But it's a peasant dish.
So
the filthy peasants.
So they make the filthy peasant dish for Ego, and but as soon as he takes a bite of it, he's immediately transported back to when he was a kid, and his mom used to make actual ratatouille for him. And so because of that, it's like the best food he's had in like years, apparently. Apparently since that one dish when he was a kid and he broke his bike.
Yeah.
So then
because he was a filthy peasant.
So he's so happy that he wants to compliment the chef personally. But they're like,
You're gonna have
you got to wait. And he's a little annoyed now, so he's just like, all right, fine, I'll wait.
He drinks a couple bottles of wine.
Literally. And so they come clean. They say that like, yeah, it's this guy, it's this rat, and he's just sort of like, no, it's not. And then and so they go so far as to recreate the entire dish for him in front
And
of
this
him.
is when the monologue of Remy over everything sort of comes back as the narrator. But
And then afterwards, like, you know, Ego just kind of goes silent. He's just sort of like really pensive the whole time through, and then just thanks them and then walks away. The article comes out later of him, you know, sort of accepting a lot of like fallacies about critics and their criticism, as well as some of the things that'll prevent the new, and why the new should still be like appreciated, and like why it can be scary to appreciate the new and whatnot. Just a lot of good stuff in that whole speech. To that end, though, he's like, you know, I just literally had the newest experience of my whole life, and it was also the best food I've ever had, and yada yada. So everything should be okay, but the health inspector. Obviously, they couldn't let that one go, and so the restaurant gets completely shut down.
oops.
So instead, though, and so Ego loses his credibility as a reviewer as well.
Which seems kind of weird to me.
Yeah, just
But
sort of like, it's not
like,
your fault there's mice in there.
Yeah, it's like you did. If it tastes good, then like that's all you knew. You didn't know there was rats there. But unless they somehow insinuated that he was saying that the rat cooked it through his review, but that's kind of stretching it.
Yeah.
Whatever. He loses credibility because whatever.
So instead, he helps Linguini and Remy open up a restaurant called La Ratatouille.
And Colette.
And Colette, that's what it was.
Yes.
So they make
don't forget Colette.
so they actually open up a new restaurant where like the signature dish is the ratatouille. And Ego's all smiley now, and he's all happy. He's actually wearing a French beret now.
He's like a frequent customer, although I'm sure he gets his food for free because he owns the place.
Yeah. And then that's it. Movie over.
Yep.
Remy's now a chef.
Oh, and all his family lives in the attic, which I'm sure isn't a problem. Sure, that's fine. Don't worry about it.
So yeah, that's Ratatouille. Now, like I said, this is my favorite Pixar movie. This movie stood with me for a while too, because I one of my biggest hobby in this world, and I do mean hobby, you know, like I don't think I could ever make a career out of this or anything, is food, is cooking. Like I love cooking.
You want to tell him about that time Gordon Ramsay liked your tweet? Or not a tweet.
I mean,
Was it
sure,
Instagram?
fine. So I make it a tradition every year during Christmas to make beef Wellington. That's like my Christmas roast. I make it the same way that Gordon Ramsay does, because he's one of my idols. I love him, and I've made it for several years now, to the point where I've got it down pretty down pat. So I did it again this year, like you do, and I'm posting it on social media, like you do. And Bethany, my wife, just like goes like, you know, you should like tag Gordon Ramsay in this. And I'm like, I mean, everybody tags him in like everything like now. Like, ain't no way he's gonna see mine. I don't want to bother
he's a
him,
busy
right?
man.
Yeah, right. And so she's like, oh, but I mean, you know, it can't hurt. Just do it. And I'm like, yeah, okay, fine. And so I did. And then I wake up in the morning to see that he actually liked my post.
No.
And the creepy thing about Instagram is that you can see like what other things that people have liked in that like time frame. And he didn't like any other food posts, not even any beef Wellington posts, just mine.
Hello.
And then I made a fanboy post screenshotting his like on my profile. And I tagged him in that as well.
Did you? Oh,
and he
my
liked
God.
that one as
Oh,
well.
my, you didn't even tell me that part.
No, you didn't see that?
No.
Oh,
Wow.
I fanboyed all over him, but you know what? I'm sure he like giggled because of that too. And then people were like,
Having a nice dinner with his family. It's like, oh, look at this fellow. I can't do a good Gordon Ramsay.
clearly not.
No,
You can do a strangely good Jamaican accent.
Thanks.
And you can go on forever with it too, but
Yeah.
nothing else really. Anyways, yeah, somebody told me I should make another fanboy post, fanboying over my fanboy post.
No.
I was like, no. I mean, like,
That's
I
quite enough.
don't have a lot of dignity, but I do have some.
Yeah.
So anyways,
Anyway.
I really, really love cooking. And so, but I didn't really get into cooking as much, or rather, I wasn't really into it as much when this movie came out. So as I learned more and more about, things about this movie and then other things about, the highfalutin culinary world, like this movie just like got even better for me. There's a lot of things that I read up. I mean, I've never worked in a restaurant. Hopefully I never will, because I hear it's just the worst. But like, I hear all the time from like professional chefs, and they're all like saying like, yeah, this movie like really got it close. They're like, we all have rats inside of our head. They're just controlling our hair. And
Wow.
yeah.
It's impressive.
But really,
Cool.
there's like
How'd they know?
there's a scene, like the first scene we get to see Gusteau's kitchen, where all it is, we're just sort of like looking at everybody and like they're all doing their thing, communicating with each other. Like people say like that's how it is inside of a kitchen. It's loud, it's full of energy, they're all working really hard. Colette is like teaching Linguini like later on in the movie about like many of like the staple like tenets about working in a kitchen and whatnot.
How to where to hold your hands and like I don't know, just little things like that.
Yeah, and they all say that like they're like, yep, that's what it is. In the Pixar is one of those studios that definitely likes to go like they like to go the distance in order to get their accuracy.
Yeah.
Like, poor them, they had to go all the way to Scotland to get their inspiration for Brave, right?
Oh man, it's a tough life.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I know they talk to a lot of like professional psych people before Inside Out too, just for
Oh, really?
example. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think they're in like the special thanks in the credits or something.
Oh, okay. In this case, they got to work with Thomas Keller. He's one of the top chefs in the world, really. He has a restaurant in Yountville, which is sort of like in the Napa Valley area, called the French Laundry. It's a highly lauded restaurant. Like I would love to eat there someday, but I think reservations are like 6 months in advance or something like that. Like that's how crowded they are. Anyways, he was like the food consultant for the film. He's the one that also designed the Ratatouille dish that Ego eventually ends up eating as well. It's actually called confit bialdi, which is sort of like it's a play on this other like Turkish dish that's like all vegetarian and whatnot. But Thomas Keller like changed it up just a little bit, changed up some of the ingredients so that he can call it his own. But it's still called confit bialdi. So that's what the official dish is. But it's still made like with the ingredients you would see in Ratatouille. And the chefs, or I'm sorry, the Pixar people got to like spend a lot of time in the French Laundry kitchen, like just watching the chefs work and like asking questions and everything like that. So they wanted it to be like as true as possible to the actual kitchen and the cooking experience and whatnot. And I think they did an extremely good job of that. Like all like the food for the most part looks really good on there. This is 2007. And I say for the most part because there's still some things when I'm watching the movie, I'm just sort of like, what is that?
Like what?
Well, like sometimes Remy is like throwing in like these like white globules of something.
I mean, it's a vegetable or something. Like, how do you distinguish a garlic from potatoes from, I don't know, chives? I mean, not chives, those aren't white, but you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, just to a certain extent.
Onions, like chopped onions, like I don't know.
There's a brief shot of like this like cylinder of like orange, which I think is supposed to be a filet mignon, but it doesn't look that way.
I don't even remember what you're talking about.
It's in when they're like watching the kitchen and then like the earliest part of the movie.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, because I've paused it before and just sort of like, what is that like a Jello?
So basically, you're very nitpicky if you're talking about this.
Well, I'm nitpicky because I've seen this movie way too.
Oh yeah,
much.
like if you just watch it like for the second time, or like me, I've probably watched it like around 4-ish times. Like I've never seen that, so I don't know.
There's way too much I know about this movie because I've seen it way too much also.
Well, we all have those movies.
What I like about this movie so much is I mean, I didn't realize until I watched Nostalgia Critics video, but there is a lot in this movie.
Yeah, there's a lot that happens.
There's a lot that happens.
I noticed it. That was one of the things that I didn't super like. It gets a little hectic. Like there's a lot that happens all of a sudden.
Yeah.
It kind of all comes out of nowhere too, because it feels really nicely paced at the beginning. Like the beginning, like, oh, he gets separated from his family, okay, whatever. And then it's like all the kitchen stuff and sort of how he becomes a chef through Linguini is like, okay, this is all paced pretty nicely. This is all cool. And then even the part where he's learning under Colette is like, okay, like this is still paced a little nicely. Like I can see what they're building up here, and it's not super new or that interesting, but whatever. And then it's like, oh, he owns a restaurant. Oh, the rats are here and they want a bunch of food. And oh, now we're down. Oh, that's a lot of stuff that's going on right now.
Yeah,
so.
I can see that too. But for me, I guess it didn't bother me because like it was all related. You know, it wasn't like Colette had like a sub story or anything, right?
Yeah, I guess.
Or it wasn't.
I'm not like complaining about it too much. It's still a really fun movie, but it gets a little bloated there. And some of the conflicts are a little bit sitcom misunderstanding-y, you know, or like I'm mad, so I'm gonna do this thing. And those never really. I don't know.
Well, like what?
Like the whole like, oh, I gotta choose between my girl and like my friend or whatever, or like, oh, like family and choosing family over this, or I'm mad at you now, so I'm gonna do this thing that's really stupid, and it's like, dude, this is really stupid. Like, just don't do this.
Wait, what's the stupid thing?
Where he's like, you know what, guys, I want the whole colony here to come eat all the food. And he's like, okay, this is just a bad decision. Like things like that, where you're just kind of like, all right, this is a little. That's just kind of me. Like I'm nitpicking a little bit, but those type things don't get to me. Like they always just make me feel a little uncomfortable. Those type of like interpersonal conflicts, just I don't enjoy them as conflicts, I guess, in a movie or really any media.
I think because a lot of times in movies and TV shows, it could really be solved pretty easily.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
A lot of times it's always just like, hey, no, I didn't say that. Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah.
La, 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 la.
Yeah, or whatever. But yeah. Anyway.
I said before, I really liked the music.
Yeah.
This is Michael Giacchino's second work with Pixar and Disney.
Because it was 4 Up, right?
Yes, it was.
Yeah. Okay.
And this was after Incredibles.
Yeah.
Because Sir Randall Newman did Cars.
He sure did.
And
that was just kind of forgettable. It was fine as far as the music.
So the main song of this movie is called Le Feston, which I think means the party or something. I think. I don't know. Dave, you're French, aren't you?
No. No.
Omelette du fromage. And so
he almost makes an omelette du fromage in this movie.
I think there is fromage in there.
You think so?
Yeah.
I don't know.
And so so that song is sung by a French singer named Camille, but Michael Giacchino wrote it, and it pops up everywhere in the movie, and it's like there is almost not another like song quite as like chill as that song, you know? Like,
yeah,
I feel like that song is like, you know, if I was like super angry at something and then somebody just sort of like held me down and like
played that song.
Yeah, and like when like put headphones on my face and like played that song, I'd have to be like
it's a little weird, but okay. I feel like you're speaking from experience somehow in this.
I might be.
Okay, great.
So and the score obviously is also really great.
That song is woven in through a lot of the score.
It is. And there's a couple other like score songs that are woven in there as well that is just good Michael Giacchino stuff. Good stuff. It's not the score never gets as like bombastic as Incredibles does, and it doesn't have to.
No, yeah, it's not supposed to.
Yeah, it's really like Parisian, you know, or at least like what Americans perceive to be Parisian, you know.
You know, like corn dogs.
C'est l'américain. Les accordéons, French baguette.
Yep. A lot of baguettes in this movie, just to remind you you're in France.
There actually are. Let's be real here, right? There's like a scene where Remy actually like gives like the guns to like a guy walking by. He's just sort of like, hey, yeah.
Hey,
and the guy is just sort of like, the crap did I just... and he crashes.
And all his baguettes.
He had like a grocery bag just full of baguettes. Come on, man.
Nothing to go with the baguettes. You just need some baguettes.
Just baguettes. I mean, that's what a good Frenchman does, right?
Yeah.
They just have baguettes.
A lot of also like cheese and wine. Cheese, wine, and baguettes. The 3 main food groups of French.
Yeah, that's a plenty in this movie as well. That's okay. It made me feel French, or at least that I was like watching French
I wonder how the
things.
French people responded to this movie, because I know like Coco got a really good response from like the Hispanic community.
Oh well,
Other
I don't think
French people.
I don't know if this is
Ratatouille.
offensive. Maybe the French people were just sort of like, oh yeah,
And we is not wrong. While they sip on their wine in the movie theater.
and meanwhile they just have this big bag of baguettes. It's like, oh wait, yeah. Oh man, I don't feel good.
I mean, they made a joke about Americans and corn dogs, and I was just like, well, yeah.
There's a scene where yeah, so Skinner is meeting with like his like publicity guy for like the frozen foods.
Yeah.
And Skinner like pitches to him a new idea called Gusto's corn puppies. They're like corn dogs, but smaller, bite size. And the guy's like, what are corn dogs? He's like, cheap sausages dipped in batter and deep fried. You know, American.
You're just like, I do like corn dogs.
Yeah, I mean, you know,
I could go for a corn dog right now.
we deep fried cheap weenies.
Yeah, it tastes pretty good. I wouldn't turn one down right now if you offered it.
Dude, anybody else got corn puppies?
We got any corn puppies? Aren't those called pigs in a blanket, or is that different?
That's different.
Okay.
Because pigs in a blanket is like beautiful.
I guess you're the guy to.
Pigs
I
in a
think
blanket
corn
are a
dogs kinda
beautiful thing. Well, yeah. Well,
Is that? You just don't deep fry them, right? You kind of like bake them.
well,
Like
if you're
a
making them,
croissant?
if you were to make them fresh, then you would be deep frying them. But if
Okay.
you were just like going to like the local Stater Brothers and would just sort of like, oh, here's the small pack of corn puppies, 100 count, and then you just like throw them in the oven, then like yeah,
No, not corn. I'm trying to differentiate between corn dogs and what are they called? They're not
Pigs in a
called
blanket.
Pigs in a blanket. Yeah.
Well, okay, so corn puppies are like, because it's the batter, you know, because it's like the cornmeal
okay.
batter, it's a little sweet.
Sure.
Pigs in a blanket are made with either like puffier pastry, like puff pastry, or like you know those croissant rolls from
Do you still
from
fry
Pillsbury.
them?
No, you bake those.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
what I was trying to clarify.
I prefer pigs in a blanket. Plus, it sounds way more American.
Kind of does actually. Anyway,
Oh, what were we talking about? Oh, there is another joke in there where like that's when Ego comes and crashes the press junket, and then he leaves and they're all just sort of like in disbelief. Then Colette just goes, listen, we hate to be rude, but we're French. And then they just run off and just leave the press junket.
yeah.
I remember Bethany really liked that line actually.
Well, I'm sure as an American she would. Anyway,
Yeah, there's not much else I would like. I mean, you know, because I can gush over this movie a lot, and I'm really but I would just sort of end up repeating myself a lot. I think this movie has a good balance of tension scenes. And not to say that the tension scenes are like the best in the world, but there's like, you know, there's some of those.
Yeah.
There's feel good scenes. There are some funny scenes. There's some great visual gags also happening through it.
This movie does a good job visual humor. It feels cartoony,
Yes.
which is cool. All the designs are very cartoony, and they have these really interesting. Especially Skinner's face has this really interesting angular sort of feature to it. You know,
When you brought up that he looked like a monkey, I was like, you are totally right. I've never actually made that connection. I'm sure that was the design
Probably,
choice too.
yeah. But yeah, and like the blonde chef who killed a man or whatever.
His name is Horst. See?
Thank you.
See? I got you.
Good job. Good job. He has a really sort of.
voiced by Will Arnett.
Wow, you really do know a lot of stuff about this movie. Okay. But he kind of has that really interesting design too. Like, it is very Incredibles where they're like human, but like Colette is also pretty skinny, as is Horst. Whereas Gusteau is just a very large pear of a man.
He looks like a gourd from
does,
VeggieTales. That's the first thing I noticed when I saw his design in the theaters. It's like he totally looks like Jerry from VeggieTales.
Yeah.
Please, somebody out there understand that reference. Please.
I need a Photoshop of his face on the gourds from Stat.
Stat.
If we were big time, we'd actually get those, but oh well.
If we were big time.
If it was a big time.
Hey.
I'm glad you went there too. I mean, Ego too has sort of that really interesting design.
Oh yeah, he's like scary lanky, right?
Yeah,
And he's
yeah.
got those like shrunken in eyes, and it seems like the lighting is always underneath him, so he's about to tell a ghost story at a campfire, you
Yeah.
know? Linguini has like a big, huge nose.
Oh my gosh, it's massive. There's like a scene where he gets wet, and so his hair is like, stuck to his head or whatever, so it's not big anymore. And like for like a bit, it just looks really unnatural because it just like it makes everything else about him smaller because the hair's down, but the nose, like now you realize the nose is like 90% of his head, and you're just like, it's totally got the Nigel Thornberry thing going.
Oh my gosh, yeah. There's a couple other just like one, like my favorite visual joke in the whole movie is when Remy is running away from Skinner because he has the papers, and like they run across
boats,
a river. Maybe it's a famous Parisian river, and I'm just like botching it.
Probably.
I think it's the river that Javert killed himself in the Liam Neeson Les Miserables.
Sure. There can't be that many rivers in Paris, right? Says the ignorant American.
I don't even know why I decided to bring that up.
Yeah,
Not like
why
you've ever
did you
seen what
bring
I'm
that up?
talking about.
No.
I could be making up this whole ding dang thing.
You really could. There's a river in Hunchback of Notre Dame, right? Maybe it's that river.
Oh, the one where they dropped off.
Yeah, the baby
Quasimodo.
river.
The baby river. That's what it's called.
Colloquially known, Gosh.
Okay. Anyways,
Anyway.
so they're being chased across the river and whatnot. Remy is like jumping from like boat to boat off of bridges and stuff like that somehow and still making it. So Skinner makes his grand leap of faith to try to get over to a boat, and he just narrowly misses. And he like grabs this tablecloth from like this couple like having like a nice dinner like on the river, and of course the tablecloth comes off completely clean without them ever noticing, and everything is still the same on there. Like it's describing a visual joke always sucks, right? But
Yeah.
like it's a wonderful joke in there, I think.
Yeah. I don't know. I think the highlight of this movie is still Ego's monologue at the end. I don't know. I get something out of it as someone who, well, I mean, I've always been sort of a critical person, but now I'm actually going on a podcast and criticizing things like Star Wars and Mario Odyssey.
Well, what do you get out of it then specifically?
I mean, he puts it really well, where it's like when you're a critic, it's easy. It's easy to criticize because it's not like, well, you make something then. You'd be like, but it'd be terrible. I can't do that. So, I don't know. You have to realize that even though you're criticizing it as common trash, I think is what he says, that it's still probably worth more than your criticism, because your criticism's easy. It's easy to make fun of people. It's easy to be negative, and that's probably kind of why I wanted to do something lighter that I could be happy about, because I wasn't happy about having to be negative on Star Wars, or especially Mario Odyssey.
Yeah.
We released that right around the time everyone was releasing their top 10 games of 2017 list, and of course everybody had Mario Odyssey at the top, and I'm just like, I feel so, I don't know.
I remember
I
I was
how hated I would be if anyone actually listened to this. You know what I mean? I am waiting for Pro Jared's top 5 or 10 or whatever he does to come out, if he decides to do it, because I wouldn't expect it to be among his.
Are you gonna feel better if it's not?
A little bit. As terrible as that probably is, I'll feel a little. It's always nice to feel like you're not the only person in the world who thinks something, which is kind of how, well, the only 2 people in the world, I guess.
Yeah, that would be us for Odyssey.
Yeah.
At the same time, though, for Last Jedi, there are hordes of people that are on your side.
Well, that's why I didn't. It was different with Mario Odyssey. It still wasn't necessarily fun to be like, don't enjoy this movie, even though that's not what I was trying to say. Like, that's always what it's going to be perceived as, I guess. Which is a little different from Anton Ego, who's just kind of a jerk who wants to shut people down. But, it's just interesting. It was a good monologue, especially with his voice. So that helps a lot.
Nostalgia Critic also really liked that too, which is, I think that's definitely coming something from him as well.
Well, he's doing the same thing, right? He's criticizing movies, and that's how he makes his living, really.
Yeah.
So, also, I didn't know being a food critic was so freaking lucrative in France.
Well, the best food in the world is made in France.
Yes, thank
the
you.
best food in France is made in Paris. And some people all right.
Okay.
I know way too much of this movie. I know too much.
That was how this experience started off, with him quoting that.
I can put on a one-man show of just me
one-man show.
doing all of Ratatouille.
I want all the visual gags, too.
Oh, okay.
Every
All
single
right, sit
one.
over there. It'll take me about 3 minutes to prep.
Great. Yeah, okay, sure.
So
Every chef knows prep is the most important part
yes,
of any meal.
Scott Pilgrim knows this.
It's true.
So, yeah. Is there anything else you might wanted to cover in this?
Not really. Did this movie like inspire you to get into cooking or?
You know what? If it did, it was subconscious.
Okay.
I got into cooking because I liked watching food shows, and also I was like, I want to try that, and so
Yeah.
like I did and made a ton of mistakes. I mean, like
Remember that one time we tried to make cookies? That was pretty funny.
Yeah, well, cooking and baking, it's like apples and oranges.
Okay.
It really is. Like the cooking world doesn't always jive with the baking world. That's why if you have somebody who's like awesome at both, they're like wanted everywhere.
Okay.
Yeah, because cooking is like extremely variable, but baking is like science. Like it has to be this no matter what. You know what I mean?
Okay.
So anyways, yeah, I made a lot of mistakes and whatnot, and I'm nowhere near like the level to be able to go on like a kitchen challenge show or anything like that.
I mean, you basically already won Gordon Ramsay. How many of those people you think had Gordon Ramsay like their
Yeah,
stuff?
I won MasterChef.
Yeah.
Did you know
Little
that?
known fact.
Did you guys know that?
Saw one MasterChef. Official.
But I do like to make challenging dishes whenever I can, whenever I have the time to and whatnot. And, you know, and I don't think that like, you know, I do think anyone can cook. And
Anyone that can cook.
I do like the distinction he makes even in the book, how he's like, or in the movie, he was like, you know, what I say is true. Anyone can cook, but only the fearless can become great. And I am afraid of the kitchen professionally, so I am not going to be pursuing that.
Oops.
So no, it might not have like been a direct influence on why I wanted to do that. Mostly, you know what it is like, you know, like when you make something and you taste it yourself and you're just like, oh my gosh. And then like you give it to somebody else and they're just like, oh my gosh. Like that's what I live for, you know?
Yeah.
That's where when I'm making something, and especially if it's something new, and then it comes together and then I taste it, I'm just sort of like, oh my gosh.
So I kind of tried to get into cooking at one point.
You
but
did.
Yeah. Maybe I just didn't get the same.
No, it's just your schedule got like way hectic too.
That's true too.
You're not
but
at home all the week.
That's true too. But yeah.
That certainly puts a hindrance.
Yeah. I was always a little afraid of like getting a react. Well, I had a couple experiences where I tried to make something that I thought I knew how to make, and then it didn't turn out as good, and it was really frustrating to me. So I don't know.
It wasn't the cookies, was it?
It was not the cookies. No.
What was it?
It was one time it was like fajitas, and one time where I like homemade the sauce. I like made it from scratch this one time, and it was really good. And then I made it again, and it like wasn't quite as good. And then it was
What was the sauce?
I don't know what it would be called. So that's what do you mean? Like what was the sauce?
I mean, what was the name of the sauce?
Dave Le Special.
What was in the sauce?
It was basically like supposed to be kind of a Worcestershire base, but I didn't have Worcestershire, so I just used a lot of the stuff that was in Worcestershire sauce, and then I added a lot of like citrusy flavor for what I felt would be like a little bit more like authentic Hispanic, since they have lots of citrus growing in like Mexico and that sort of area. So
Do you know what's
kind of a
in Worcestershire
citrusy-
sauce?
I just looked at like the ingredients online. Like, what are the ingredients in Worcestershire sauce? It was basically a lot of the stuff except, you know, not like the anchovies and things like that.
The
that you
anchovies
just
are
don't
actually
have.
really important. To
They are,
Worcestershire.
but I'm just saying it's still made for a pretty tasty sauce.
Yeah,
But-
yeah.
Well, the first time. I mean, the second time was still good, but it was not as balanced, I guess. I don't know. And then the other thing was, God, what's that Italian rice dish?
Risotto.
Risotto, yeah. The second time I made risotto, it just wasn't as good. It was kind of disappointing.
Well, I've made risotto like 5 or 6 times, honestly. I haven't made it like a whole lot, but I've made it. And risotto, to me at least, is one of those dishes where like it only gets better the more I do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I think the first time I made it, I didn't cook down the stock enough, and it didn't cook enough into the rice. So we were like, we're eating risotto going.
Yeah,
No,
it
this is
wasn't
good.
anything like that. It was more just like the flavor. Again, like the wine was a little too overpowering or something like that. It just wasn't as the flavor wasn't as well balanced. So, and it's one of those things. It's impressive to me that cooking your beef Wellington, right?
Yeah.
Once a year, that you can like retain enough of that to improve after a whole year of not doing it, because I would just be like, I forget everything. Like,
Look, I'll be honest. I mean, I'm kind of surprised by that as well.
yeah, but that hasn't been my experience at the same time. So, like, when I made my butterscotch pie for Thanksgiving, I
Oh,
don't
your
know that I
butts
could do
pie.
it. Yeah. I don't know that I could do that again now, and that was only a couple months ago. So,
Well, again, that's baking too. Like,
but you know,
yeah, I know.
I have to. Yeah. Anyway.
There was at one point where Dave was able to spend a couple of days at my apartment because my wife was traveling in Ireland of all the places, and we had a burger off. I forgot what your burger was though.
It was just like a Worcestershire burger, probably because it was forgettable. I didn't feel like it was that great.
I homemade a barbecue sauce and I made poutine too. We made it together.
We did
'cause
make poutine. That was
we had to
pretty
go
fun.
to a Sprouts and find the cheese curds for that.
Yeah.
But we made our own French fries too. We didn't buy like the frozen kind and whatnot.
Oh yeah, you did do that, huh?
I remember
pretty
also
cool.
like I helped you through the steps of risotto too.
Yeah.
Like Dave actually like asked me like, you know, stuff about cooking and whatnot. And like I mean, if you asked me again tomorrow, I would totally help you out. But
Yeah.
I mean, I know your schedule is just so crazy.
Yeah. Well. Aren't you busy Saturday? Aren't you busy those days usually?
On what? Saturdays and
Whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, your schedule is much crazier.
I mean,
than
I'm
mine
just
right now, I
busy,
think.
man.
Yeah. Yeah.
stuff? Yeah, that's the only thing that's preventing me from cooking a lot more is just how busy I am. And sometimes, to be fair, it can get pricey. You know, it's if you live just in an apartment with one other person, like you got to try to think of dishes that like will last you for a bit too.
Yeah. That too. My wife is her tummy is very sensitive, so I would be cooking with a lot of restrictions on me.
Yeah, it
So-
wouldn't be impossible, but yeah,
It'd be pretty tough. It's like low acid cooking, it turns out, is really kind of difficult because, like, okay, like, no, like, spicy stuff. Like, that's not a big deal. I don't like spicy stuff that much anyway. No citrus. All right, I kind of like citrus. That's a little tricky. No tomato. Tomatoes in basically everything. Okay, well, that's okay because we've got meat. Oh, we can't use fat, so I can't really use butter. All right, so plain pasta, anybody? Like, that's just kind of where it winds up, you know? I don't know.
Here's a burger and
No
here's-
fat burger.
well, like here's a burger, here's an orange salad, and here's your Tums milkshake.
Yeah, basically. Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Dairy. You can't really use dairy that much because that actually has some, like, the fattiness in it. And
Well, I think also
it's like,
because
what's the
your
point anymore, man?
because your body has to produce extra acid in order to break down the dairy.
And that too, yeah.
Yeah. Food. Welcome to Foodcast with the Why Do I Talk to You guys?
Yeah, basically. Should probably wrap this up.
Yeah, I guess.
Leave
Although
me.
I could earnestly talk about food all day.
I could listen to you talk about food. I don't know how much I'd enjoy it, but I could listen to you talk about it all day.
I always sort of joke that like a one day where Dave like can't make it to a podcast, I'll make a cooking podcast, but like still just audio. Like,
Yeah.
oh man, look at this, guys.
This
So
looks
here you want to
great.
add some of this stuff. This stuff is great.
This red
Yeah.
stuff.
You want to make sure you have this tool.
Yeah.
Always use this tool. All
It's
right,
got to
here we
look
go.
just like this. Jeez.
All right, so we'll go ahead and wrap up. Thanks for hanging on. If you did,
Well, you never named the other chefs. Tell me what the Jamaican guy's name was.
his name is Lalo.
Just be some bad juju mon. One line in the movie. Got to talk about juju.
Sure.
Thanks, Lalo. Okay, go ahead.
All right. Have I proven myself?
Yes.
All right.
You're for real.
All right. Thanks again. If you happen to stay on for this whole podcast and me, just both of us just gushing over the movie Ratatouille. We will do one on Dave's favorite Pixar movie, which is The Incredibles.
Remember that? Oh, yeah. Right.
But we will do that closer to the release of the sequel.
Which is soon? Isn't that soon? I keep forgetting because there's like 3 movies that we're saving for when the movies actually come out. Those being Incredibles, Wreck-It Ralph, and Frozen. And I always forget the order of when they come out.
I'm gonna assume Frozen's gonna be out during Christmas time. I don't know if it's
Yeah,
this
but I don't
year,
remember if
though.
it's this year or next year.
I think actually it's gonna be Wreck-It Ralph Christmas time.
This year?
I think so.
Well, Anyway, so those movies will happen, but specifically during those times, I guess.
So
Whatever those are.
So Dave, just be patient for a little bit, I guess.
Yeah, gotta make sure we review Mary Poppins right before Mary Poppins 2 comes out too.
Thank you guys for listening to our podcast. Special thanks to
Christmas this year.
Danny Barrett Huvert for the artwork. I'm trying not to let Dave talk at all. And for the artwork and for the combined efforts of Rob KTA, Expert Novice, and OC Remix for the intro and the outro music.
I like Mary Poppins.
We'll see you guys in the next one.
Take care.